Kia ora, everybody. We don't have in this format, because it is such a short time, the opportunity to build a lot of whanaungatanga and get to know each other, but I'll just give you a little bit of a one-sided view of who I am, and so you know my credentials for what we're going to be talking about, which is a subject close to my heart. I'm a registered psychologist. I'm here in Tamaki Makaurau. I'm here in my sunny home office, and very pleased to be presenting this topic to you today, which is, and I'm going to share my screen, overcoming self-defeating beliefs. And the subtitle is Dealing to Imposter Syndrome for Career Success. Okay, and the reason for me speaking to this is it's something that's very dear to my heart, because I have a very strong interest in people being successful, and particularly being successful at work. And so for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this, and we'll do some practical problem solving of how we can overcome self-defeating beliefs. Now, I could talk to you about self-defeating beliefs in the context of, you know, all the little anxieties that we have, and the, you know, things that create emotional, difficulties for us and our whole lives. And there's this whole school of thinking that you might be familiar with. I know that some of you will be, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy, and we could talk about debating and contesting, you know, negative beliefs and so on. I'm not going to go down that path. I'm going to keep this very focused on careers. So hence this focus, the subtitle on imposter syndrome for career success, because that's a particular type of self-defeating belief. So let's have a look at what imposter syndrome is. What we're going to cover today is, what is this thing, imposter syndrome? It's not the same as Stockholm syndrome. Who gets it? Where does it come from? And what can we do about it? What can we do about imposter syndrome? So that's the agenda for today. And as I say, and as Marissa says, you'll get a chance to ask some questions. So let's define it. Imposter syndrome. A belief that you are undeserving of your achievements and the high self-esteem in which you are, in fact, generally held. So you believe that you don't deserve your paycheck, your success, the esteem with which your colleagues hold you. You might feel that you are not as competent or as intelligent or as clever or as hardworking as others might think. And that soon enough, when they discover the real you, you'll be unmasked. You've got this fear of being unmasked for the fraud you are. And as part of imposter syndrome, you're probably performing at quite a high level. You've got an important job, you're achieving lots of things, but inside you believe that there's something fundamentally missing. You're just faking it. And as I say, it's sooner or later, you've got this thought that somebody's going to discover you for the fraud that you are. You'll make a mistake. Somebody will see that you're really incompetent, that you're being overpaid, that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. And all of these thoughts come to you despite the evidence to the contrary. And I'm talking about the good performance reviews, the colleagues who value your opinion, the clients who thank you for what you do. Despite those things, you still believe that deep down you're a fraud. So that's imposter syndrome. And that's what I would like to unpack a little bit with you in the time that we've got today. Imposter syndrome is a faulty belief that can cripple. Okay. Now, not all faulty beliefs are bad for you. Not all faulty beliefs can cripple your career or cripple how you are in the world. So, for example, you might think that you're actually quite attractive, despite the fact that you might be averagely not attractive. You might believe that you're smarter than average, despite the fact that you are not. And those things can't cripple you. In fact, they're probably actually quite good for you. When you look at people who are quite functional in this world and who have, good mood and achieve quite a lot, often they have a slight tendency to overestimate their good looks, their ability, their hard work, their positive attributes. And overestimating how good you are is not something that's going to cripple you. In fact, it's probably going to help your success because you will be more confident going into situations. The flip side is sometimes you can be overly confident, and sometimes you can be the sort of person who has an exaggerated view of their own abilities. But that's not necessarily a bad thing for your mental health, is it? On the flip side, if you've got this faulty belief that in fact you're not good enough, that on the other hand can stop you from doing the things that you were put on this earth to do. It can hold you back. It can prevent you from going for that promotion. It can prevent you from speaking up when you know something because you think, actually, I'm not sure I do know this. Okay, so it's a faulty belief. It's a bit like believing that we didn't get to the moon. It's a bit like believing that bleach will, cure COVID-19. These things are beliefs that can cripple us, and imposter syndrome is like that. So who's most at risk of imposter syndrome? Okay, well, high achievers are most at risk of imposter syndrome. So normally it doesn't tend to affect the people who are just cruising. Okay, and I'm going to use an HR term from people in culture, the numpties. Okay, the numpties who are just cruising, they're slackers, they're the people who they don't care if they particularly do a good job, they're just there to pick up the paycheck, and sometimes not even for that. Okay, they're not going to get imposter syndrome because they really don't care about their job. It's the people who really do care about their jobs, the people who are trying their hardest often, who are most prone to this imposter syndrome. Okay. I see we've got a question that's coming. I'll just hold that to one side for the moment. It's a good question, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Does it affect men and women equally? I'm sorry, we don't have non-binary in this grouping here, and I can't speak for that particular demographic. This was the only statistic that I could find. But essentially, in the last year, according to surveys that have been done of this, in any given year, 50% of men will feel that they are an imposter at work. But 2/3 of women will feel that as well. So it tends to be have higher impact on women. I don't know why that is. Perhaps one or two. You might have an idea about why that is. I can't really speak to that. But, you often hear this kind of truism as a man will put himself forward even though he's not necessarily competent, whereas a woman might tend to hold herself back until she thinks she's perfect and perfectly deserving of that higher position or whatever. Maybe there's some gender difference in there. It's certainly reflected in the stats. Okay. But what does this mean? The high achievers, 2/3 of women and half of men in any given year will be experiencing imposter syndrome. Well, it's a little bit like this cartoon, isn't it? There's this room full of people and they're all kind of together, but they're all kind of sort of alone in their thoughts, thinking all these people around me seem to have it together and I still have no idea what's going on. But guess what? They're all thinking the same thing. And so what I'm trying to make here is that this is really common to feel like this. Okay, that's why I'm talking about it. It's a real issue for us. Imposter syndrome can affect anybody. And so I talked about high achievers. Maybe you can use the chat function. I'm not sure if it'll work, Marissa, but maybe throw up Anybody got any idea of who this is? If you have, then throw it up in the chat. Anyone got any idea? I'll give you a clue. This person believed for most of their career that they didn't deserve their success. They didn't deserve their recognition. And that they got into the position that they'd gotten to by pure good luck, and that sooner or later be recognised that in fact they hadn't actually achieved anything because it was all due to other people, and tended to minimise their personal involvement in their achievements. So if I show you another picture, it might prompt you to figure out who this is. Neil Armstrong, the first person to set foot on the moon in 1969. I remember I was in primary school at the time, and we all listened to that event over the radio system in the school and sat in the classroom. And it seemed like a really important thing at the time. And so he became a hero to a lot of people, but he always had this belief that he didn't quite deserve the adulation that he got. And yes, he was right. It was a huge collaborative effort, but still, to put yourself in a little tin can, travel 250,000 miles, and then get out into an environment that nobody had ever been before, that was totally inhospitable to life as we know it, did require some sort of skills, didn't it? And some sort of personal attributes. So I'm just making the point that if Neil Armstrong can have imposter syndrome, then any of us can. Okay. How do you know if you've got it? Well, you can ask yourself, is it hard for me to accept a compliment? Oh, you did really well on that. Oh, it was nothing. If your tendency to say is, oh, it was nothing, then you might have imposter syndrome. Instead, if you take a healthier view of compliments, you can say, well, thank you, actually. Yeah, I did work really hard for that. And it means a lot that you've recognized that. That's quite different from saying, oh, it was nothing, I didn't do anything. So think about whether you can accept a compliment and whether you can believe a compliment and how that compliment makes you feel. Does it make you feel awkward, or does it make you feel good? If it makes you feel awkward, you might have imposter syndrome. I should say in all of this, there are cultural differences in cultures that might kind of change this a little bit, because in some cultures it's less acceptable to take credit or to stand out, and I totally acknowledge that. But that simply might mean that culture might be more prone to having imposter syndrome. So there's something to think about, the role of culture in all of this. Do you attribute your success to luck? So if something good happens, oh yeah, I just got lucky that next time I'll get discovered for the fraud that I am. Oh yeah, gee, it was really lucky that the client behaved that way, Phew, otherwise I would have been discovered. If you think like that, then maybe you're more likely to have imposter syndrome. Are you afraid that people might actually figure out that you're not that skilled, that you've just been getting by on a wing and a prayer, and that if you just studied a bit harder and you read that thing that you were supposed to read, or you went on that course that you really do need, that you might just be a little bit better at your job as opposed to actually being quite good at it now? If you think like that, then maybe you've got imposter syndrome. Do you believe that the success that you're having at the moment isn't quite deserved? And do you look at other people and think they've really got their stuff together, and you'd rather be like them at work than you? Okay, so if any of this is ringing true, you might have imposter syndrome. So what can we do about it? Well, there's one really important thing we can do about it, and we can realize that successful people and people who are comfortable in their own skin at work understand that close enough is good enough. Okay, and I'm going to come back to what that means in a little bit more detail as we work through. So you might have heard of the Pareto principle, and this is about figuring out which part of your job results in 80% of your results, okay? Because for 20% of your effort, that's going to give you, and this is called the Pareto principle, it's a well-accepted management principle, going to result in 80% of you getting your job, you achieving your targets. Right? So you need to be thinking not about the 80% and working long, long hours in order to be perfect and get the perfect result. It's about saying, what can I make the most impact with in the least time? What can I make the most impact with in the least time? And why is that important? Because time is limited. We're only on this planet for a short period of time. Do you want to spend all your time working and feeling like you're not getting anywhere? No, you want to be able to play, be with your family, look after your body, look after the people in your community and the people close to you and your friends and colleagues. And so you don't want to be working all hours. You want to be thinking about what you can get the most impact with using the Pareto principle. What 20% of your effort is going to give you 80% of your results, okay? Perfectionism. Close enough is good enough. One of our daughters, when she was in primary school, we noticed that because we live in a community that is, it's got its fair share of middle-income people and parents with high expectations. They all expected their kids to have homework. Okay, so to come back from primary school in year 2 or whatever with homework. And, I think it's because of middle-class anxiety. People be thinking, unless my kid gets homework, they're going to be a failure. Well, we noticed what she was doing in her homework book. This was when she was about 6 or 7. She would spend an hour doing a page of homework and then cross it all out because she'd made one mistake and then move on to the next, and then she'd start again, and it was getting her really anxious. And we were asking her, have you done your homework? And the moment we saw that, it was a bit like this little girl here. The moment we saw that, we just, from that day on, never ever asked her whether she'd done her homework, because we figured that she had this little streak of perfectionism. And if we didn't help her get on top of that, then she would cripple herself by going over and over and over things until she got anxious, trying to get perfect. So, I'm telling you that personal story because perfectionism is the enemy of greatness. You will not find high achievers who are doing that on a sustained basis if they are very, perfectionist. It's okay to get stuff wrong. It's okay to get stuff wrong, and that can help you overcome imposter syndrome. Okay. So I just skipped on a few slides. You have to look at getting things wrong as not being the opposite of success. Unless you're getting things wrong, you will not succeed. Failure is part of success. You cannot get to success unless you allow yourself to fail. If you don't allow yourself to fail, you will cripple yourself in your striving for achievements. You'll cripple yourself with exhaustion, anxiety, and so on. So do not be afraid of failure. Okay. I'm going to go back if I can to there. So what else can we do about it? You have to figure out what are your self-limiting beliefs. So I've talked a bit about the perfectionist, the person who must get things right. You need to ditch that. The natural genius, this is the person who really annoys us all. They're the person who kind of is close enough, good enough, and they kind of got the big picture and they know the right answer and they can think in any given situation what to do. And they've got this talent for just scraping by. Maybe they're the sort of people we should take a leaf out of their book. The soloist, this sort of person thinks, well, if only other people weren't involved with this, we'd get it right. The only problem is that means that you can never call on other people to help you with the task. And let's face it, most tasks are too big for one person, particularly the big stuff. The expert, this is the person who absolutely needs to be seen as, the source of all information. And that can be quite limiting. Needs to be an expert, won't do anything unless they've gone and studied it up. Okay, so I come back to close enough is good enough. And the last set of, personality type at work, if you like, is the Superman, Superwoman, the person who thinks they must do it all. They think they must spin those plates, be across everything. Well, you're just going to crash and burn with that. So you need to sort of figure out where you sit in terms of, I've given you some very simple personality types there. You need to think about the whole, set of tasks that you've got, and think, what personality type are you bringing to the workplace? And, perhaps what you could modify about your own beliefs about needing to be an expert, about needing to be across everything, about needing to get things absolutely perfect. So we're getting towards the end of the webinar. So if you've got any questions that are coming up, and I know we've got one already, but if you've got more, then please put that up and we can have a little bit of a kind of a facilitated chat about that. So yeah, do that now. Explanatory style. I don't know if you know what I mean by explanatory style, but this came from the work of another psychologist, very famous psychologist, in fact, called Martin Seligman. And he said, well, actually, people who are more prone to self-limiting beliefs are more inclined to explain away their successes. Okay, something good happens to you and you say, oh, I got lucky. Okay, and it won't last. Okay, as opposed to something bad happens, oh, I got unlucky. Somebody who has an explanatory style that could be quite limiting would say, oh, that was my fault. Okay, so this explanatory style is really important in terms of self-limiting beliefs and in terms of imposter syndrome. Something good happens, you get a success, oh, I got lucky. Something bad happens, oh, that was my fault. You see the difference? If you flip that on its head, you say, well, if something good happens, yeah, actually that was due to me. That's really healthy. Something bad happens, oh, that wasn't my fault. Actually, that could be quite healthy. There's situations where perhaps it's not so good. You do need to own up in a realistic way to behaviours that aren't necessarily good, but a little bit of it's quite healthy, So try and own your successes and try not to own all your failures, and that will be a healthy explanatory style. Okay? And certainly see your successes. To see your successes more clearly, think about how you're doing, pay attention to what's going well, talk about your successes and achievements with others, celebrate them, write them down when they happen, and keep your CV up to date, because it's so easy to forget the good stuff that we've achieved. So if as soon as you get some special reward, some project success, a client success, whatever, put it on your CV. Put it on your CV so you don't forget it until, and next time you can take that out and say, yeah, I did achieve that, actually. I did achieve that. So anyway, we've kind of got to the end of it. I want to make a little bit of space for our question. And I just want to share this cartoon just before we close one last time to remind us of how, even though it seems incredibly isolating, the sense of being incompetent and an imposter, so many of us feel it and have felt it at some point in our careers. The way we can deal with it is to use some of those tools that I talked about, and particularly connecting with other people and checking in. So, the closing slide, thank you for coming. We're all in this together in a literal sense. Many of us do feel this, and I encourage you to reach out and get support.